You're always very poetic with me, Carl. So let me go to you first of all. Describe Victor Osimhen to me.
The man in a carbon fiber mask is what I've dubbed him. He is an extraordinary striker. He's one of those players that I think will go on to define the 2020s. And there's going to be a point. I think there's certain players, him, Jurrien Timber, Frankie de Jong, a couple more where you see him and you can see very large clubs going, we either need to buy this player, we need to devise certain schemes to stop this player, or we need to change what we're doing in our academy so we can create more of this type of player. He has a combination, he's very good iterative skills. So it's the idea of, it's very rare to have a striker that tall and that strong, be that good and that inventive with his feet. It is very rare to have a striker that can just jump that tall in general. So he's pushing physical paradigms, but also his inventiveness in mind and his inventiveness in finishing is also something we haven't quite seen before, which I think makes him remarkable.
Is he part of a new wave then, John, of number nines?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd describe him as a new wave of number nines, but I think that all elite clubs want number nines who can score goals. And so whenever it comes to a striker like Victor Osimhen, who is running just under a goal every 90 minutes in Serie A this season, you do everything you can to get those players on your team. And yeah, I think that's why he's in this conversation. It's very easy for us to talk about all of the various qualities that Osimhen has, and he does have many qualities. But when it comes to the bottom line for a lot of elite clubs, you need to have that player who you can rely on to be able to generate goals. And I think Victor Osimhen is not only a striker who you can fit into a system, he's also a guy who can create goals out of nowhere. We've seen that happen so many times this season. That's why this conversation is happening, because Victor Osimhen is that next level of striker who not only will fit into your system and get you a certain number of goals every season, but he's the sort of striker who will win you games and will get you really challenging at the elite level.
Just on the fit into the system then, is it irrelevant what the system is, he'll fit into it?
It's an interesting question, because I think people don't realize that actually tactics and talent are often in tension, right? So a lot of coaches will get more out of their players with a tactical system. But when you bring in a player with talent that can, enact those moments of skill, then the tactics sort of goes a little bit behind by the wayside. And I think this is the conversation we've been having all season about Erling Haaland, right? We have Pep Guardiola, the greatest tactician of all time, and then Erling Haaland, probably the greatest goal scorer of all time. And there's a tension there. There's two things that aren't necessarily in tandem. And the big question is, how does the tactical system change to fit Haaland? And I think that's the question you have to ask when you talk about tactical fit with Osimhen. It's not how does he fit into our system per se, but how do we bring him in and then make our system fit him as well to a degree.
Mark, I know you're a man of NFL fandom, shall we say.
Yes, yeah.
You might be familiar with the term planet theory, which is the idea in the draft. Well, every time there's a draft, they talk about planet theory, which is the idea of, okay, there's an athlete out there and he's got a couple of flaws. He's got a couple of things that need to be ironed out. However, there are only a handful of people on the planet that are capable of doing what this person can do. So you bypass your tactical system, you bypass whatever, you short circuit your system, you bring him in anyway, and you figure out the rest. Because to an extent, Victor Osimhen can fit into a number of tactical systems, but at a certain level, Victor Osimhen can be the system if you're in a pinch, right? I've watched him play for Nigeria, and there was definitely a point in time where the system was, give it to Victor and let him figure it out.
Well, and actually on that, the other point that you would always take from the NFL is, and the draft, best player on the board. Even if you don't necessarily have that need, or you have gaps elsewhere, if you have a generational talent, a transitional talent, whatever you say, go and get him and then figure it out. And that, it doesn't tend to happen. If you're Manchester City and have Erling Haaland, you don't then go and sign Osimhen, although, who knows what they might do, but sign Osimhen as well. But that is evidently what you're talking about, Carl, with him.
Yeah, I truly think Osimhen can be the difference to a number of football clubs. I think he has a way of turning a half chance into a full chance, and a way of turning a speculative effort into a goal that can turn a team that, you know, possibly should be in the Europa League places into a team that can win. I'm not talking about Napoli there, but we've seen a Napoli team that was almost there, has frequently teased possibly winning the Serie A title under a variety of managers. And now they're runaway leaders, in part because Osimhen just knows how to put the ball in the back of the net in, frankly, ridiculous circumstances.
Would you pay over 100 million for him, John? If you're not if you were running a team, obviously, I mean, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the big question, isn't it? It's going to be which team has that 100 million available, because I think the rumours have always circulated around him going to Manchester United, and there's, I think, a lot of reasons for that, because we know that Erik ten Hag likes a striker in that kind of mould. He's used usually traditional nines, apart from when he's played a little bit of underdog football in the Champions League, and Victor Osimhen is obviously the perfect prototype for him. Big question is, can Manchester United afford 100 million? And then, as you've already mentioned, Man City already have Erling Haaland. In English football, that probably leaves, I guess, Chelsea as the money throwers. Arsenal again, that's a money issue for them, but all of these clubs will be assessing him, working out whether or not they can fit him into their squad, whether or not they can fit him into their budget as well.
I kind of feel like this is happening with quite a few players at the moment, Carl, where you're sort of looking at them and you're thinking, God, they're an amazing talent. Their price tag might be, I mean, Bellingham's another prime example here. That you could throw, we did Declan Rice earlier this week, you throw Declan Rice in there. Yes, lots of clubs want them. Yes, lots of clubs are linking with them. But actually, when you drill down into budgets and numbers, whether the market is going to be there or not is a different matter.
Yes, and I think this is a soft impact of the 2.5 seasons of football behind closed doors and COVID. Right, there's a number of football players who are either at the club they currently are for a bit too long, or are at a wrong or different club because the club they were supposed to go to couldn't afford it due to COVID. Donny van der Beek could have been at Real Madrid if not for COVID-19. Paul Pogba could have been at Real Madrid if not for that, right? I think a player of Ruben Neves' talent or of Yuri Tielemans' talent probably would have moved higher up in the Premier League table if the 2019-20 season didn't have so many games behind closed doors and so many of the top 6 clubs losing about 2 million per home game. So you've got transfer rates constantly increasing and wage rates constantly increasing. And you've got a number of these big clubs who are beginning to, you know, quote unquote, heal their budgets. But also, especially in England, you know, you've got top 6, which means there's always 2 clubs that are going, we're in the Europa League instead. So they can't quite stretch the budget. And then you've also got this, I think, really interesting situation where there's some clubs that perhaps haven't had 4 seasons in a row of Champions League football. So therefore, they have slightly stricter FFP considerations. If Manchester United want to buy Victor Osimhen, that will cost, I think you have to start talking about 100 million. Okay, they might have 100 million to spend, but also they have certain FFP things to sort out. So then that becomes a question of, to bring in Osimhen, you have to push out 3 or 4 players to make that look good on the FFP books. Can they make that work in time? There's also the fact that De Laurentiis is, I'll put this politely, Daniel Levy-esque in the transfer market. So anyone trying to buy Victor, I don't think he's going to turn up for the first week of preseason. I think if he is going to turn up, he's going to turn up mid-April. He's going to turn up mid-August or late August as well, shall we say? So that creates another wrinkle. Should Victor Osimhen be 100 million plus striker in this market? Absolutely. Who can afford that? Secondary question, big wrinkle. Might not be the team you expect.
No, and actually, John, it's sort of, you can't see. Well, Barcelona certainly couldn't afford him. Real Madrid might be looking elsewhere. Who knows? There's still a Kylian Mbappe question mark around Real Madrid, whether that's this summer, next summer, every summer until he eventually goes there. You wonder, and there has been a link, you wonder whether it's Bayern Actually, Bayern seem to be would be the biggest threat, you would imagine, to a move to the Premier League.
Yeah, and I think that is again because of tactical considerations. Because as we said before with Victor Osimhen, like the tactical considerations aren't maybe as important. If you want to get a striker who is just going to score a lot of goals, then you will try and fit your team around that striker. But I think the teams that we mentioned, Manchester United and Bayern Munich, particularly, both very good tactical fits as they stand for Victor Osimhen. So it makes a degree of sense that sort of move might be done. But 100 million sounds like a lot to me for a Bayern Munich transfer. But these are strange times that we live in, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you allowing yourself to get excited with your Manchester United connections, Carl?
Not enough. I'm holding back. I will say I am Ghanaian, so to praise a Nigerian striker for this long has been quite painful. Just a scooch. I think Victor Osimhen would be very good for Erik ten Hag. However, there would be small tactical considerations to be made. We've talked a lot about his relationship with Kvaratskhelia on the left wing for Manchester United. That's Marcus Rashford's position. Marcus Rashford is not the sort of cross first, shoot second archetype that Kvaratskhelia is. So they'd probably have to be some work done on the training ground to build that sort of hypothetical playing relationship between Marcus and Victor. However, I think talented players tend to figure things out, so that could work. The Bayern Munich one is one of those things that slightly frightens me with my Manchester United hat on, because it makes the perfect sense in the way that Bayern tend to be very smart and tend to always find a good striker to play for the 5 or 6 years, hoover up loads of goals, and eventually win another treble. So we'll see.